The Buchanan approach. Buchanan thought that most economists focused their attention on market allocation. I think this is still true today. He also thought that this emphasis was misguided. I agree with him, and for many of the reasons he wrote about. Here is what he wrote in an essay titled, "What Should Economists Do?" This was published in January 1963. Quote, "Economists should concentrate their attention on a particular form of human activity and upon the various institutional arrangements that arise as a result of this form of activity. The elementary and basic approach that I suggest places the theory of markets and not the theory of resource allocation at center stage. I want economists to quit concerning themselves with allocation problems. I want them to concentrate on exchange rather than on choice." End quote. And I agree with him. Here is a quote from the same essay that gives an important reason for his suggestion. "The market is not a means toward the accomplishment of anything. It is instead the institutional embodiment of the voluntary exchange processes that are entered into by individuals in their several capacities. This is all that there is to it. Individuals are observed to cooperate with one another, to reach agreements, to trade. The network of relationships that emerges or evolves out of this trading process, the institutional framework, is called the market." What different ideas might be emphasized if we follow Buchanan's suggestion? His emphasis on exchange encourages us to emphasize that exchange is voluntary, pairwise social interaction. Every market exchange involves two people, a buyer and a seller. The voluntary part means either person can always say no to the proposed trade and walk away. Because of this, we notice that every exchange benefits both parties. And this aspect of exchange is true, whether or not the resulting market allocation is Pareto optimal. Even when efficiency economists say the market fails, every exchange that makes up the market allocation will have this property. Both buyer and seller are better off than they would be without their exchange. Both parties choose such social interactions as the means by which they each pursue their own personal projects. The projects of the buyers and sellers are personal means to many other purposes than a Pareto optimal allocation of resources. Thus, it seems that the market failure economist is taking on the role of benevolent dictator. The market process, in contrast to the market allocation, coordinates all the individual efforts aiming to achieve personal individual projects by cooperating voluntarily with others. We economists can observe cooperation. We can observe that people interact in efforts to enjoy mutual gains from trade. The market failure economist looks past this to play the role of expert, asserting there are ways to improve on the market allocation. But the market failure economist assumes the ability to observe movements of individuals to higher or lower indifference curves in order to make this assertion. Buchanan says we cannot see such movements. We can see efforts to mutually achieve gains from trade. That is all there is to it. But do we observe efforts to mutually achieve gains from trade when there are shared consumption goods? The market failure economists say no. Public goods are market failures, of course. The problem is people will free ride, and efforts to mutually achieve gains from trade will produce less than the optimal allocation of resources to the provision of public goods. Buchanan wrote the following in his book, Demand and Supply of Public Goods. Despite the presence of this dilemma, there exist mutual gains from trade in public goods and services, and these motivate individuals to seek agreements or changes in the rules governing behavior, even if there is no incentive for them to engage in person-to-person bilateral exchanges of the ordinary sort. Buchanan looked at real behavior and believed he saw much exchange-like behavior associated with shared consumption goods, and even when he looked at government. Unfortunately, the market failure economists use models of optimal allocation for their work as experts controlling the economy, or if you will, their work as benevolent dictators. They did not ask questions about what people in government actually did. In Buchanan's words, they continued blithely to ignore the whole political process. They remained unconcerned with the way fiscal decisions actually get made. So Buchanan's evaluation of what economists were doing, both with regard to the study of the market process and the study of government or the public sector, led Buchanan to begin to develop a new approach to the study of government. The new approach was explicitly intended to be a positive economic analysis. It was concerned with how actual decisions in government get made. This new approach became known as public choice. This next quote from Buchanan tells us what public choice is about. Collective action must be explained and understood through individual behavior. The questions that must be asked are, how do publicly supplied goods and services get organized in large number groups? Who decides, and on what basis, which goods and services are to be publicly supplied? Who decides, and on what basis, how much of each good and service to provide? Who decides, and on what basis, how costs are to be shared among members of the community? Who decides, finally, on who is to decide? So the next section of this course will be about many public choice ideas. There will be a lecture to introduce you to many of the ideas, and the Sheep Book, the one by Bryan Caplan, will also be about ideas fitting within public choice analysis. But public choice was not the only conceptual creation of Buchanan by which he hoped to make economic analysis of government better than it was. He noted in his book, Public Finance and Democratic Process, that people also choose the rules that are written in a constitution, such as that of the United States. Ultimately, at some constitutional stage of decision, they must also select or choose the structural framework for choice itself. They must choose the institutions under which both day-to-day market choices and ordinary political choices are implemented. His study of the constitutional stage of social interaction led to yet another new area of economic study. This new area became known as constitutional political economy. I will explain his view of constitutional political economy in another set of videos. Plus, the last book we read in the course, the book by Buchanan and Wagner, will be an illustration of what an economist might do in constitutional political economy.